House of Wax is a chilling thriller drenched in blood and revenge, and its concept of turning real people into wax figures still sends shivers down the spine today. The film we're recommending in this episode is the original House of Wax from 1953. It was later remade in 2005, which I've already covered in a previous video. Feel free to check it out on my channel. In 1950, on a cold and damp New York street, there stood a wax museum owned by the renowned sculptor, Professor Jarrod. To Jarrod, the museum was more than just a business. It was his home. Every wax figure he sculpted was lifelike and full of soul, poured into with immense passion and care. He sculpted with feeling and experienced each figure deeply. Walking in through the door is Jarrod's business partner, Matthew, who came by tonight to check the accounts. Matthew is a profit-driven businessman. After investing $20,000, he was still dissatisfied with the 200 daily ticket sales. He wanted more, and even dreamed of rivaling the famous Madame Tussauds in London, which was always packed with visitors. He urged Jarrod to start making horror-themed figures to attract thrill-seeking tourists, but Jarrod was deeply devoted to historic figures. His most famous works were wax replicas of legendary lovers like Cleopatra and her lover Antony, President Lincoln and his assassin John Wilkes Booth, and Joan of Arc. Among them, his favorite and proudest creation was Queen Marie Antoinette, wife of King Louis XVI of France. That figure looked so real, it almost seemed alive. You could almost see her breathing, and her gaze would follow you wherever you moved. The secret was in her eyes. They were made of glass, perfectly matching the size and color of the real queens. Still, to appease Matthew's constant nagging, Jarrod agreed to set up a horror-themed section in the future, featuring murderers, torture devices, and the like to draw in more guests. Jarrod understood what Matthew was after. If he couldn't help him make quick money soon, Matthew might pull out of the partnership. So he shared some good news. Tonight, a famous art critic named Mr. Wallace would be visiting. Not only was he influential in the art world, he was also incredibly wealthy. Jarrod hoped to convince him to buy out Matthew's shares with a generous profit on top. Matthew was intrigued and agreed to hide upstairs in the office, letting Jarrod handle the conversation. Before leaving, he reminded Jarrod, if Wallace was interested, make sure to raise the asking price. Sure enough, the visiting critic Wallace was full of praise for Jarrod's masterpieces. He said it was a shame that too few people knew about them, and what the museum lacked most was proper publicity and marketing. He said that after returning from Egypt in 3 months, he would consider buying a stake in the museum, but Matthew was not satisfied. He didn't want a vague promise 3 months down the line. He needed a quick exit and a big payday now. He had another investment opportunity lined up, one that could bring in a fortune, and he couldn't wait. So he suggested to Jarrod a brilliant money-making idea. Set the museum on fire and make it look like an accident, then collect the $25,000 insurance payout. Jarrod was stunned. How could Matthew come up with something so wicked? Every wax figure here was like a dear friend to him. Burning them would feel like murder. But before Jarrod could say no, Matthew had already lit a match and set Marie Antoinette's dress on fire. That was beyond crossing the line. Jarrod, furious, lunged at Matthew and the two struggled. The cunning Matthew dodged while continuing to set the place ablaze. Soon, flames engulfed the wax museum. Jarrod's beloved creations melted into waxy puddles, their faces twisted and lifeless on the ground. Jarrod was knocked unconscious by Matthew. Before leaving, Matthew even opened the gas valve. With a thunderous explosion, the wax museum was reduced to ashes. 18 months later, Matthew finally got what he wanted: the full insurance payout. After promising his fiancée Kathy a trip to Niagara Falls, he returned to his office to count the stolen money. But he didn't know that behind the sofa, a disfigured man in a cloak was hiding. The man turned off the lights, then strangled Matthew until he passed out, hanging him inside the elevator shaft. Meanwhile, Kathy, having lost her fiancé, quickly found a new boyfriend and was getting ready to attend a banquet that evening. She was a materialistic woman. Her friend, the beautiful Sue, had been going through a rough time. She had interviewed for countless jobs without luck and was so broke she couldn't even afford rent. That night, After narrowly dodging a confrontation with the landlady, Sue returned to the apartment she shared with Kathy, only to find Kathy lying dead on the bed, and the one hiding behind the door was the disfigured man in the cloak. The sight of such a terrifying figure made Sue scream in terror, and she bolted out the door with the cloaked man chasing close behind. At a street corner, Sue held her breath and hid in a dark nook, not daring to move a muscle. She kept running through alleys and streets. Just as the man was about to catch up to her, she ran into her boyfriend Scott's house. Only then was she finally safe. In the dead of night, inside the New York City morgue, a tightly wrapped corpse suddenly sat straight up. Moving quietly in the shadows, the man fumbled around the morgue until he finally found Kathy's body. With the help of an accomplice waiting outside the window, he successfully smuggled the corpse out and disappeared into the darkness. The only witness to the case, Sue, went to the police station accompanied by her boyfriend's family to give her statement. When she was told Kathy's body had disappeared from the morgue the night before, she was left speechless in shock. Meanwhile, from Detective Tom, they learned that several bodies had gone missing from the morgue not long ago, including those of businessman Matthew and a deputy district attorney named Allison. On Madison Street, art critic Wallace knocked on a door, which was opened by a deaf and mute man named Igor. Inside the house, waiting for him, was none other than Professor Jarrod, the sculptor who had miraculously survived the fire. Jarrod told Wallace about his incredible escape and expressed his desire to reopen his wax museum. This time, the wax museum would feature shocking and spine-chilling characters designed to terrify visitors and make a huge splash, and a fortune. Jarrod's legs had been left paralyzed, and his hands were severely burned in the fire, making it impossible for him to sculpt again. But he had students and assistants who could help bring his vision to life. In the basement studio, Jarrod asked his other student, Leon, to demonstrate to Wallace how their latest wax figures were made. They first heat the wax to a boiling point, then carefully spray it through a complex pipe system onto a finished plaster mold. After that, they paint it, resulting in a wax figure so lifelike it's almost impossible to tell it's not real. Jarrod then had Leon open a large cabinet, revealing a wax figure that looked exactly like his late business partner Matthew. The resemblance was so uncanny that Wallace was stunned and immediately agreed to invest in Jarrod's plan. Not long after, a brand new wax museum called House of Wax opened its doors, and business was booming. The main attraction was its grisly theme: death, violence, and horror. It was a blood-curdling spectacle filled with disturbingly realistic wax figures. One wax figure, an ancient Egyptian beauty, was even fitted with a modern electric mechanism, allowing her to dance gracefully on stage. Each exhibit perfectly recreated scenes from infamous crimes, so lifelike that one woman fainted on the spot from fright. Sue and Scott also visited out of curiosity and were in awe of how real the figures looked. Scott, a young sculptor himself, was thrilled when Jarrod invited him to help with the museum's creations. He accepted without hesitation. One wax figure of Joan of Arc caught Sue's attention because the face looked exactly like her deceased friend Kathy. Jarrod explained that he had seen Kathy's photo in the newspaper and thought she resembled his vision of Joan of Arc, so he used her likeness for the sculpture. But in truth, Jarrod had already noticed that Sue bore a striking resemblance to the beautiful Queen Mary. He invited Sue to pose as his next model. Back home, Sue was still shaken. She drifted off to sleep, but was jolted awake by a strange sound. Bathed in pale moonlight, a shadowy figure stood by her window, terrifying her to her core. He was the very killer who had murdered Kathy. Sue screamed for help, and the figure fled into the night. The next day, Scott took Sue to a Sunday dance show on 14th Street, hoping to cheer her up and take her mind off the wax museum and the mysterious man. Sue started to feel a bit better, but then she suddenly remembered something. Kathy had a piercing only in her right ear, and the wax figure had the exact same detail. But how could Jarrod have known that from just a photo in the newspaper? To clear up her doubts, Scott took Sue to see Detective Tom and explained everything. Tom promised to investigate further. He and his officers secretly paid a visit to the House of Wax. There, they confirmed that the Joan of Arc figure did look exactly like Kathy, just as Sue had described. They also noticed something suspicious about Jarrod's student Leon. He resembled a wanted criminal named Hendrix, a gifted but troubled artist known for his drinking. At the station, Tom discovered that Leon was carrying a pocket watch that belonged to the late Deputy District Attorney, Allison. He immediately placed Leon under arrest. Late at night, Sue got ready to head to the Wax Museum to meet Scott for dinner. But after finding out she was coming, Jarrod sent Scott to a fake flower shop to supervise the background setup for a new wax figure scene, effectively sending him away. Alone, Sue stepped into the Wax Museum, unaware that Igor had quietly locked the door behind her. The place was eerily silent. The lifelike wax figures seemed to come alive in the dim light, each one silently screaming the story of their pain. Sue called out for Scott, but no one answered. Her fear grew with every step. Once again, she stood before the Joan of Arc figure. Lifting the headscarf, she found exactly what she feared. The wax figure had the same golden hair as Kathy. Suddenly, a voice came from behind her. It was Jarrod saying, "You shouldn't have done that." Then he stood up, revealing that he had been faking his limp all along. Terrified, Sue turned and bolted, but the main door was already blocked by Igor. Jarrod rushed forward and grabbed her. As Sue struggled desperately, she accidentally struck Jarrod's face. Chunks of wax mask crumbled away, revealing a horrifying face underneath. Jarrod was the killer in the cloak. In the basement workshop, Sue, now unconscious, was stripped and tied to the operating table by Jarrod. Jarrod then lit the gas burner beneath the furnace, preparing to create the wax figure of Queen Mary he had always dreamed of. Back at the police station, Leon, unable to resist the lure of whiskey, finally confessed everything about Jarrod's crimes. Jarrod, having lost the use of his hands, could no longer make real wax figures. So he murdered Kathy and Matthew and stole many other corpses to fill his house of wax. He also revealed that Sue was Jarrod's ultimate obsession, his perfect Marie Antoinette. Tom immediately mobilized the entire police force and rushed to the Wax Museum to rescue Sue. Inside the museum, Scott had waited and waited for Sue, but she never appeared. Feeling uneasy, he went back in and found Jarrod's empty wheelchair sitting in front of the Joan of Arc display. Sensing something was terribly wrong, he tried to head downstairs to find Sue, but Igor suddenly charged out and blocked his way. The two of them got into a fierce fight, which raged from the back rooms into the main hall. In the end, Scott was overpowered by the much stronger Igor, who beat him senseless and tied him to the guillotine of the Louis XVI exhibit. Just as Igor was about to finish him off, the police burst in and tackled him to the ground. Realizing the police were moments away from breaking in, Jarrod frantically rushed to activate the wax spraying mechanism. Sue, bound and helpless, could only scream for help while her fingers scratched desperately at the surface of the work table. In the nick of time, the police stormed in. Jarrod, now like a cornered beast, lost all control and wildly swung at the officers, managing to knock several of them back. But he was no match for their numbers. One officer landed a blow that knocked him out, sending him tumbling into the vat of molten wax. In an instant, the scalding wax engulfed his body. In the end, he truly became one with the wax he loved so much. Just as the temperature of the wax vat was about to reach its explosive peak, in the nick of time, Tom rushed in and shoved Sue's work table out of the way. With a thunderous blast, the glass pipes burst, and a wave of boiling wax erupted into the air. Sue was saved. The film ends here. This movie is a tribute to the earlier 1933 film Mystery of the Wax Museum and the 1945 version titled House of Wax. In 2005, director Jaume Collet-Serra remade the film, adding more suspense, gore, and a cast full of sexy actors and actresses, and it was a hit. For many of us, that was the first version we ever saw. Although this version was made all the way back in 1953, 67 years ago, it still shines through its clever script and the brilliant performances of its cast. It was a huge success for Warner Brothers, sparking a wax museum craze that swept across America during the mid-1960s. This film was also one of the very first 3D movies. Back then, 3D was the cutting-edge trend. Many moviegoers tried on 3D glasses for the very first time, marveling at the unique visual experience. According to the Guinness World Records, While this film wasn't the first 3D movie, nor the first with sound or color, it was the first 3D feature to be presented with stereophonic sound, pioneering the era of stereo 3D cinema. All right, that's all for today. See you in the next episode.